We're going to continue with our Story of God series that we're in. We started a couple of weeks ago, started at what is the very beginning as far as our understanding of this story. And many of you signed up to get our daily scripture readings along the way. So for those of you who for the very first time in your life have been consistent for 2 solid weeks spending time in God's Word, I'm not going to say congratulations because, that's kind of weird, but way to go. And that's an awesome thing. And I know reading words on a page is not necessarily alone going to change a life, but when we open up our hearts and allow God to do His work, it absolutely will. And your life will be changed forever if you allow it to. So if you've not already signed up, you can text STORY to the number on the screen behind me, and you will get on Mondays 6 readings throughout the week. So hold on to that text and just keep going back along the way, and we'll be able to work through this together, and every week is going to lead up to the message time today. So if you've been a part of that, you're up to speed, right where we are today. Last week we talked about Noah, the ark, the flood, the whole thing that blows our minds at times and is a bit confusing, but we worked through that together. And then today we're going to skip ahead because about 300 years after that moment, a group of people in a newly organized city that would be known as Babylon decided to try to build a tower to make a name for themselves. And God said, you're not going to make a name for yourself right now, just as I would not allow Adam and Eve in the garden to do their thing when they were trying to be like me or to be able to be not necessarily an equal, but maybe kind of get away from the whole I'm the creation, you're the creator thing. And I'm not going to allow you to do that either. So God decided to disrupt things, and He actually disrupted their ability to communicate, and they were all scattered out because they could not understand each other's speech. And so groups were going and moving around and scattered from Babylon because of this inability to communicate. So you have all these different languages now out of this prideful attempt to make a name for themselves. Well, I bring that up because out of that scattering from Babylon, there was a family led by a man named Terah. And Terah had 3 sons. One of those sons was Abram, who would later be known as Abraham. So they scatter from Babylon, from this Tower of Babel thing that happened, and they're on their way to a place called Canaan. They don't quite make it there as far as the entire family. Terah dies while they're in Haran on the way, and Abram, ultimately with his family, makes it to Canaan. Now, Abram, whose name God later changed to Abraham, left a legacy. And if I was to boil it down to the 2 parts of the legacy, number 1, Abram was called the friend of God. He was God's friend. And that's not just writers, editors, compilers of the scriptures looking back and saying Abraham, who obviously was a friend of God. This is actually God Himself saying, Abram and I have a unique thing. And in the book of Isaiah, chapter 41, there's a moment in which God is speaking through the prophet Isaiah, and He refers to him this way. He says, but you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, you, descendants of Abraham, my friend. So unlike any other moment we have in Scripture, God identifies Abraham and says, that's my friend. We have a thing. So He's the friend of God. He's also known as the man of faith. Not a man of faith or a man who was faithful or a man who chose faith, but the man of faith. Thousands of years after Abraham lived, a man named Paul was writing a letter to one particular church in a place called Galatia, and he wrote in Galatians chapter 3, verse 9, so those who rely on faith are blessed along with Abraham, the man of faith. So he's the man of faith, and he is the friend of God. That's his legacy. You say, well, of course, all these biblical people, they had all these, great faithful stories passed along to them. I get it. Not the case with Abram. We're told, and we know from history, from what Joshua would later say, that Abram came from the family of Terah, and they came out of this Babylonian, ungodly, polytheistic, worshiping suns and moons and stars and wood and hay, and were worshiping all of this stuff, and that was the family he came from. There was not a moment in Abram's growing up years where Terah sat down and said, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Let me tell you a story about how we got here. Let me tell you a story about the God I serve. Abram grew up going, we'll worship that when we need that. We'll worship that when we need that. And together we're going to build this tower because we're going to be like gods. And that was his background. So if at any point over the next few months you work through this story and go, I can't identify with these people, the man of faith. How in the world am I supposed to leave here understanding, identifying with the man of faith? Because the man of faith was not the man of faith when he appeared on the scene. He was a confused young man trying to figure out what was real and what was not, what God was true, what gods were not, trying to figure all this out. And somehow in the end, he left a legacy of being the man of faith and the friend of God. So how did he get from point A to B? How did he get from this confused, nomadic, Babylonian product to now being known as this person? Well, that's the journey we're going to take a look at today. What we're going to find is that ultimately the way that the change took place was test after test after test after test. So open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12. His story is there. And for many chapters afterwards. And there's a lot to get across. I was even asked after the first service by one sweet lady. She said, "Did you have a lot of caffeine today?" I think I'm feeling the pinch of getting this in, and I'm getting... So if you're visiting today, just lean over to someone who doesn't look like a visitor and goes, "Is he always this way?" I don't mean to be. I just have a lot, and I'm kind of excited. So I'm going to reel it in and see what I can do. But in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, calm, Chad. Let me breathe. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram is 75 years old, and the Lord challenged Abram to go in a direction without knowing the destination. He said, "Get up and go to a place I will show you." And if you're going to a place and you don't know the destination, all you have is a direction, you're going to have some conversation. So that's easy to remember, right? God was saying, "I'm going to develop a relationship with you in this process. I want you to pack everything up in your family and go." Where? We're going to go together. And along the way, I'm going to build a relationship with you. And you don't know this, but eventually I'm going to call you something I call no one else. I'm going to call you my friend in the end. But it's going to begin here as you head out. When we go on trips, we all know we have to have the directions because we never really know how to get anywhere. We plug it into our Waze app and we put it on, hook it into our car, and then we allow someone to tell us, turn left, up 900 feet, turn right. Like we have that. It's gotten so advanced, we even have Nate Bargatze who actually talks to us when we're in the car, so you can choose his voice. So he's talking to us and dropping a couple of jokes along the way. Like he leads us on. And when you're in a car and you're driving and you don't know where to go, you've got to have some bit of conversation or someone speaking to you. And that was God's plan for building that with him. So the next time God calls you to move and doesn't give you a lot of answers as to what's next, he just says, "I want you to take this step. Understand that perhaps God is saying, we need to spend some time together. And I'm going to need you to have to look up and go, do I do this or do I do that? Do I go here? Are we about to stop? Do I need to slow down? Do I need to speed up? Because I'm going to build this relationship." Well, he went in the direction without knowing the destination. The relationship is being formed, and it seems like it's obvious how Abraham would be known as the man of faith. I mean, he obviously is killing it here, being willing to take his family and just head off in the middle of nowhere. But we're not going to take time, but from chapters 12 up until 15, there's moment after moment where Abram faces a famine and he needs food. And instead of relying on God, he hides and runs to Egypt, and he takes his wife with him, but he's afraid that something would happen if they know he has this beautiful wife. So he says, "No, she's my sister," and he lies, and they have this cover up going on. And ultimately they're kicked out. They go back to the land. They've got all this stuff. He fights with a family member. They decide to divide and move on because they can't get along and their servants can't get along. So you got family division going on. There's another moment of deception that's all in there. There was a lot of difficult that Abraham went through till we get to the point where we are in Genesis chapter 15. So it's almost as if God gives him the promise 2.0 or 1A or 1A and 1B here, and this is 1B. Because we're going to find God reinforcing something he already told him, but then he goes on to be even more specific. And the setting here is Abram is still trying to work out how he's going to be able to have descendants when he has no kids. He has no kids. His wife doesn't have any kids by a previous, it's just the two of them. And he's looking around saying, you're going to make me to be a father of a lot of people. I don't have a child. My closest relative here is this heir, and I guess he's going to be the one, right, God? And God speaks to him in verse 2 and says, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man, this relative he had spoken of, will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and said, look up at the sky, count the stars, if indeed you can count them. And then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. So he reinforces, no, you're going to be the father of a nation. Through your own blood, there is going to be a descendant. Now look up at the stars. Look up in the sky. Like this is a picture of what your legacy is going to be. So he reinforces it. And Abram believes it, but he and his wife get together and he says, I'm 86. And she says, well, I'm not far behind. And so, I know I can't have a child. And in chapter 16, we have one of the stranger moments in their marriage story. And I even wonder if this was a test, but not from God, but maybe a test from the wife. I'll show you what I mean. In verse 1, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abram agreed to what Sarai said. And I wish there had been more of a pause. At least he maybe would think about it for a moment. But as we're reading it, it's immediate. There's a period and then the next word. And I wonder if she was hoping he would go, oh, sweetie, you're the love of my life. It's almost as if he said, okie doke, like that, just right away. So again, if you ladies needed reasons to just roll your eyes at all the men in the room, what are we... Abram's if you want me to, I will if you... So he agrees and they have this moment. Sarai says, perhaps I can build a family through her. Well, guess how long it took for her to rethink her logic. It wasn't very long. And now Abram's got this child by another girl who she sees every day and watches this child grow up. Family begins to fall apart because Abram got the destination on this one, but decided that he would take the direction into his own hands. In other words, okay, God, I see what you're doing. I can make this work. I see the ultimate goal. Now I've got a plan to get there. And God said, no. That's the how matters as much as the what. Okay, I've told you what's going to happen, but how you get there is important. God's not a God that just says whatever means necessary. As long as we meet together in the end, we're good. And many of us look at our faith life that way. Well, God saved me. I'll see him in heaven. Between now and then, I'm kind of on my own to how to get there. That's not the picture that God paints for his people. And God said, no, this really matters. So God steps in chapter 17. He changes Abram's name to Abraham. He says, you're not just going to be a father, you're going to be the father of many. Then he says in verse 15, God also said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. So she's also changed from princess to princess of many. Her name is also in this moment changing. So instead of Abram and Sarai, you got Abraham and Sarah. And God says, this is my plan, and we're going to work this out. Through her, you will have a child. We skipped to chapter 22 because if the story had stopped there, he would not be called the friend of God and the man of faith. If the story stopped there, he's just Father Abraham who happened to have a kid that they ultimately named Isaac, and Isaac was his heir. It would end without this legacy that we know is real. So how did we get there? In chapter 22, verse 1, sometime later, God tested Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Now again, I would love to think there's a pause here. But what we're told in the subsequent verses is early the next morning. Like, he didn't wait. Early the next morning, he told Isaac, we're going to go worship. We're going to go worship on the mountain. We're going to take the journey. We'll take a couple of our servants and we're going to go. So they load everything up. He tells his wife, Isaac and I are going to go worship. Where are you going to worship? We're going to sacrifice at Moriah. So they head off. They get to the mountain. They begin to climb. He tells his servants, the two that were with them, stay behind. Isaac and I are going to make this trip by ourselves. They go to the top. Along the way, Isaac asked his dad, Dad, where's the animal? Like, we're going to make a sacrifice. I know this is what we do, but where's the animal? And he just said, God will provide. And because we know what he said earlier, because we just read it through, there's a lot there. There's a loaded answer. They get to the top, and we have this picture of a father. And if you've ever been blessed to have a child, and you've looked into the eyes of a child who doesn't understand what's going on, but you know it has to happen, there is a look, and there is a feel, and there is a fear, and there is a terror on that face. And Abraham, looking at that face, still chose to bind up his child, lay Isaac on that altar, and then right at the moment when the action was about to take place in verse 10, it says, he reached out his hand, he took the knife to slay his son, but the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up and he saw a ram caught in the thorns, and he took the ram and slaughtered the ram, made the sacrifice. And then we find in verse 15, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord. And because you have done this, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. He reinforces that same promise. So this, to me, is what is unique, that God believed enough in Abraham to say, in the end, this is going to be the picture and this is going to be your legacy. And yet the promise was not going to be a reality until he passed that test. Until he passed that test, because God said, now I know that you fear me. And because you have done this, now the reward is coming. So until he passed the test, it wasn't going to be a reality for him. And as I've thought through the idea of testing over the last couple of weeks, I've been reminded of a couple things. One, a test is always proof. A test is proof that there is something next, that something is coming, that there is still something to do. There is no test if there's nothing to prepare for. If it's over, you don't take a test. If we're done, then I'm done. There's always that moment in college where you find out that final exams are optional for those who have such and such a grade. Optional means I'm not coming for me. Why do I need this? I'm not studying for this, much just putting myself through this unless I have to, unless there's a reason to. If I'm moving on and I'm ready, then I don't need this. And anytime I experience a test in my own life, I feel like God reminding me he's not finished with me yet. And there's something that he's still working out in my life, because not only is it proof, a test is also preparation. There's something specific that God has lined up for me, and if I'm not ready for it, God's not going to give it to me yet. I've got a test to still pass, and there are times when I want God to move. I feel like he's about to move, and sometimes I realize that it's me. I'm not ready for it. And until I'm willing to go through it, pass the test, if you will, then it's just not going to be a reality for me. Last week, I was here and met with some men that I've gathered around, and they pray with me and pray for me, and I'm incredibly thankful, and they are my courage and so many times. And we were talking about moving forward and praying about things, and I clearly felt like God was saying, you need to give more. And by give more, I mean financially, back to the church. And I thought, you know what, since I was 7 years old, I've done the 10% thing, and I've gotten very comfortable with that. I know God can do more with 10 than I can do with 90, so I figured that out. But over the years, I'll do 0.5% more. And because I'm a percentage giver. I don't trust my own feelings, because I've never, ever felt like doing, just giving away anything. I'm a little bit of a stingy guy. So I just have to have percentages, commit to it, and move on. And I literally I left that night, thought, you know what, Chad, you can do more. Like, you can do more. And I was so ready. Like, this week is, in the first of the month, I was like, you can do more, man. I get home, I met my wife at the door. She said, hey, supper's ready for you. We've already, eaten, but I've got it. I thought, oh, okay. So I sit down, I've got this meal in front of me. I'm like, wow, what is going on? Like, you are treating me even better. She treats me great. Even better than maybe most random Tuesday nights. I thought, okay. So she said, so how was your day? How was the meeting? I'm like, it was great. And go good. I'm a guy. That's the descriptive words for me, great and good. She said, well, also, our upstairs unit is out. I thought, you've got to be kidding me. It was 7:30 at night or 8 o'clock at night, and it was 91 degrees upstairs in the thermostat. And I thought, kids come down, box fans, we'll figure it out. And I thought, I just said I would give more. Like, this is not going to be a free repair. Like, this is not going to be that. And so I thought, that's fine. The next day, I thought, you know what? I'm going to just kind of chill in the morning at the house. I'm a little frustrated right now with all this. I'm just going to mow. And mowing is my happy thing. Like, that's what I enjoy doing. Got out to mow, got halfway through my yard, and the belt snapped, and it was off. And I thought, it's like, I got it. Like, I'm feeling, I see what you're doing here. If I had not said, Chad, you need to give more, like, none of this happens. And not everything is a test. Not every hard day is God delivering a test. God doesn't tempt us. We can find that in Scripture. But what I do know is that without the test, I'm never going to be ready for what it is that God has in store for me. And without the test, you're never going to be ready for what God has in store for you. Well, how does God test us? Certainly, we're not going to live in ancient times and go through these things. I hope all of you men have already decided what to say, if your wife ever suggests anyway. But you're going to be tested in different ways. But if we look back at the 3 tests, if you can say there were 3 that we looked at today, in that first test, he said, I want you to go to a place that I'm going to show you. And there will be times, and there have been times in my life, where God didn't give all the answers as to how it was going to unfold. He just said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go. And do I trust God enough to go? Even when I don't know how everything is going to unfold. If you're calling me to it, I'll do it. I have a lot of questions, but I'm willing to go ahead and get started before I have all the answers. And then perhaps what feels like the opposite of that, what we had in the moment in which Abraham was told he was going to be a dad and he had no kids and he was way too old and she was too old, and how is it all going to work out? Do I trust him enough to wait? Most of the time, God does, at least for me, call me to take steps of faith. Maybe he just knows that he made me that way. That's what he chooses. But then every now and then, I'm there ready to take a jump and just figure it out on the way down to the ground. And God goes, wait, hold on. And I'm ready to go. I'd rather jump and fall and break something and then just put a cast on it and move on than just stand and wait. I'm not a very patient man. And there are times when God says, hold on. I know you think you can accomplish it this way, but we're going to go here. And everything in me wants to go, God, that's the long way. That is not the most efficient way. Buc-ee's last week. Anyway, that is not the right way to do this. And God says, just wait. Wait on my timing. Wait till I surround you with the right people. Wait till I put you in the right frame of mind. Wait till you calm down a bit. Wait until you have this perspective. Do I trust him enough to wait? And then we have that ultimate example in which we had this crazy test in which Abraham was called to sacrifice his own son. So do I trust him enough to let go? Let go of things that matter the most to me. 18 years ago, I've got a friend now who's told me, I wasn't with him during that time. We weren't friends yet. We didn't know each other. But 18 years ago, a friend of mine was in the hospital with his wife, and they were about to give birth to triplets. And it was they were about to be parents, first time, and they're going to begin with 3. And it was going to be an incredible beginning to a large family. But of course, premature births happen in those moments. So they were rushed in way too early. The kids were tiny, tiny, tiny. And she delivered 3 children. One of them immediately went back into the arms of Jesus. And so they're there with a boy and a girl, 2 of the 3 triplets. And one day he sat me down and was telling me a little bit of his story. And he said, it was very clear that our daughter, we felt like, had the best chance of making it of the 3. And there was one day, they'd been in the hospital for a week or so at this time. And one day in which they came in and said, we fear that this might be a goodbye for your son. And he went and Vanderbilt Hospital had this little chapel at the time. He went into the chapel. He was by himself. He said he got on his knees and just held up his hands and said, God, I'm no longer going to ask for you to save, sustain, and keep him here. I'm just going to release him. And if you want him back, if this is the time, then I give him back to you. And he got up from his prayer time. He walked away. And as he was going towards the room, he met up with a doctor, and they said, things are different. It looks like he might make it out. And then he says that at that moment, he knew what was going on, that baby Isaac was going to be okay because he gave him back to him. And Isaac graduated from high school a couple of months ago. But in that moment, he said, the thing was, I had to say, go ahead, take him. Because one way or the other, I'm going to see him again. Whether it's here or whether it's when I meet him next to the throne of Jesus, one way or the other, I'm going to see him. And if you want him back, you can take him. He is yours. And God chose, just like he did with Abraham, to give Isaac back to this dad. Now, that idea of whether it's now, whether it's later, whether it's here, or whether it's on the other side, that ultimately is faith. The man of faith, Abraham, over and over was looking for something ahead, and he based his life on promises for something ahead. And ultimately, he never even got to see what he was believing in more than anything else. And that was this nation that was going to be built in which all the people were going to be brought together, which was fulfilled in the person of Jesus. But Abraham, Sarah, and many others are listed in Hebrews chapter 11 as those who lived their lives by that kind of faith. And in Hebrews chapter 11, we've got all sorts of characters that show up in different parts of God's story. But in chapter 11, verse 8, we've got the story of Abraham and the story of Sarah. And it says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to a city with foundations whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as countless. These people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. So if you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus, I want you to know that that's that longing in your heart for a heavenly city. Abraham lived his life waiting on a promise that was never fulfilled this side of heaven for him. And then he closed out by saying, therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them.